On a freezing February night in Toronto, Daniel Moore and his lifelong best friend Ryan Blake left a downtown bar, laughing and drunk on celebration. Minutes later, Daniel's black BMW spun out of control on Lakeshore Boulevard, slamming into a light pole. Ryan died instantly. Daniel survived. What began as a night of friendship turned into a headline that shocked the city. A man who killed his best friend behind the wheel. As investigators uncovered hidden secrets and the courtroom divided Toronto, one question echoed everywhere.
I can't believe we made it this far. Look at her shine under that light.
Of his lifelong sentence of guilt.
Hang on, I got the keys right here.
The streets of Toronto glowed with the reflection of neon signs on melting snow. The night thick with the kind of cold that bites through jackets and lingers in the bones.
Look at her shine under the light.
Are
you good to drive?
Yeah, I'm fine. Just gotta focus.
Daniel Moore and Ryan Blake had been waiting for this moment for months. Ryan had just landed a major position at a financial firm downtown, and Daniel had insisted they go out to mark the occasion. The two friends had been inseparable since childhood, growing up only a few blocks apart in Scarborough. They had gone through every phase of life together. First jobs, first heartbreaks, even starting a small tech venture that was finally beginning to see success. Tonight wasn't just about drinking. It was about remembering how far they had come. They met at a trendy bar on King Street, the kind that buzzed with energy and the smell of whiskey and fried food. Inside, music pulsed from speakers, and laughter rolled through the crowd. Daniel ordered rounds for everyone, his voice growing louder with each drink. Ryan tried to pace himself, sipping his beer slowly. But Daniel kept insisting on shots, saying this was their night and they deserved to go all out. By midnight, both were unsteady on their feet, their words slurred, but their smiles wide.
For the crime of which you have been convicted, this court sentences you to 15
saying
years.
He lived nearby and could handle it. Outside, the wind had picked up, sweeping thin layers of snow across the road. Daniel jingled his car keys in his hand, a stubborn grin spreading across his face. Ryan hesitated, watching his friend sway slightly. For a brief moment, he thought about taking the keys, but he didn't want to start an argument. They'd both had enough to drink, but Daniel seemed confident and Ryan trusted him. That trust would prove fatal. They climbed into Daniel's black BMW, the interior still warm from the heater. The dashboard lights glowed soft blue, and the faint smell of alcohol mixed with the scent of leather. Daniel turned up the radio, the speakers vibrating with bass as he pulled out onto the nearly empty streets. The city looked beautiful from inside the car, streetlights reflecting off wet pavement, traffic lights changing in a rhythmic dance. It felt, for a fleeting second, like the world was theirs. But the illusion didn't last. As they reached Lakeshore Boulevard, Daniel's foot grew heavier on the gas pedal. The speedometer climbed past 100 km/h. Ryan told him to slow down, his tone half joking, half serious. Daniel laughed and said something about being fine, about knowing these roads better than anyone. The car roared forward, slicing through the icy air. Then, without warning, the tires hit a patch of black ice. Everything happened in seconds. The steering wheel jerked violently and the BMW spun across the slick road. Ryan's body slammed against the door as metal shrieked and glass shattered. The car hit a light pole with crushing force. The sound echoed through the empty street, and then silence, broken only by the distant hum of the city that continued, unaware. When the car finally came to a stop, smoke curled from the hood. Daniel's hands were shaking, his vision blurred by blood dripping down his forehead. He turned toward the passenger seat and froze. Ryan wasn't moving. His head rested against the shattered window, eyes half open, unmoving. Daniel reached out, calling his name, but there was no response, only the cold night air slipping through the cracks of broken glass. In that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of twisted metal and shattered trust, Daniel realized his laughter had cost him everything. The sirens arrived within minutes, painting the icy street in flashes of red and blue. The sound was deafening, yet Daniel barely heard it. He sat on the curb, his hands trembling, staring blankly at the mangled remains of his car. His clothes were soaked in blood, some his, some Ryan's. He kept mumbling the same words, over and over, as paramedics moved around him like ghosts. "He's my best friend. "He's my best friend." The medics rushed to Ryan, but their expressions said everything before the words were spoken. There was nothing more they could do. Police officers took control of the scene quickly. One approached Daniel, asking questions he couldn't fully process. How much had he been drinking? How fast was he driving? Did he remember what happened? Daniel tried to speak, but his voice cracked, and all that came out was a choked sob. When they asked him to blow into the breathalyzer, he didn't resist. The result flashed red. His blood alcohol level was nearly double the legal limit. The officer sighed, handcuffed him gently, and led him to the back of the patrol car. At the hospital, doctors cleaned his cuts and checked for broken bones. He had none. The irony stung. Ryan was gone, and Daniel had walked away with only scratches. As the nurse wrapped a bandage around his forehead, he stared at the ceiling, trying to replay the night in his head. The laughter, the lights, the spin of the car. It all blurred together until it felt like a dream he couldn't wake from. By morning, the news had already broken across Toronto. Every local channel carried the same headline: Toronto entrepreneur in drunk driving crash. Best friend dead. Reporters gathered outside the police station, hungry for details. Social media filled with outrage. Strangers wrote that Daniel should never drive again, that people like him ruined lives without remorse. Others pitied him, calling it a tragic mistake. But no amount of sympathy could drown out the guilt that had already taken root inside him. Daniel was moved to a holding cell that afternoon. The walls were bare, cold, and gray, the air heavy with disinfectant and despair. He sat on the narrow bed staring at his shaking hands. The silence was suffocating. Somewhere down the hallway, another inmate shouted, but it barely registered. All he could hear was the echo of the crash and the sound of Ryan's voice in his head, fading away. When he was told he couldn't attend the funeral, something inside him broke. Ryan's parents wanted nothing to do with him. The judge granted their request for a private service, closed to anyone involved in the investigation. Daniel spent the day of the funeral sitting in the corner of his cell, watching the service through a small phone screen provided by his lawyer. He watched Ryan's coffin lower into the ground, surrounded by family and friends who once welcomed him as one of their own. He wanted to scream, to beg for forgiveness, but he couldn't find the words. When the video ended, he sat in silence for hours. The reality of what he had done was finally sinking in. He hadn't just lost a friend. He had destroyed a family, shattered his own future, and erased years of brotherhood in one reckless moment. That night, as the cell lights dimmed, Daniel lay awake, unable to close his eyes. The image of Ryan's lifeless face haunted him, replaying again and again. Every heartbeat was a reminder of the life he still had, the one Ryan never would. The guilt didn't just linger, it consumed him, whispering in the dark that he didn't deserve to be alive. Weeks turned into months, but the shock of that night never faded. Daniel's case became one of Toronto's most discussed tragedies, and every new detail added weight to the guilt he already carried. Investigators worked tirelessly, piecing together the events leading up to the crash. At first, it appeared to be a simple drunk driving accident, but the deeper they looked, the more disturbing truths emerged. Detectives collected security footage from around the bar that night, hoping to confirm the timeline. What they found shifted everything. The footage showed Daniel leaving the bar twice. The first time he exited alone around 10:45 p.m., long before he claimed he and Ryan had decided to head home. He walked straight to his BMW, parked a few blocks away, opened the door, and sat inside for nearly 10 minutes. The camera caught the faint glint of something metallic: beer cans. Investigators later confirmed that several empty cans were found under the driver's seat. It appeared Daniel had been drinking alone in his car before going back inside to convince Ryan to leave. This discovery painted a darker picture. It wasn't a single bad decision in the heat of the moment. It was a pattern of reckless choices that began long before the crash. When this information reached the media, public sympathy vanished. People stopped calling it an accident and began labeling it negligence. Ryan's family, already drowning in grief, now had to relive their son's final hours under a microscope of headlines and public commentary. But the most heartbreaking revelation came from Ryan's phone. When police extracted the data, they found a series of messages sent in the last 15 minutes of his life. Ryan had opened a rideshare app and requested a car home at 12:14 a.m. The driver had confirmed, but 2 minutes later the request was canceled. Investigators believed Ryan canceled it after Daniel insisted on driving. That single tap of a button, the decision to trust his best friend, was the moment everything changed. When Daniel learned about the messages, he broke down in tears during an interview with detectives. It was one thing to know he had killed his friend, but another to realize that Ryan had hesitated, that he'd almost escaped. That truth dug into Daniel's mind like a splinter that wouldn't stop bleeding. He stopped eating for days, refusing visitors and remaining silent during court preparations. Meanwhile, public anger grew. News outlets ran nightly segments about impaired driving, using Daniel's story as a warning. Old photos of him and Ryan smiling together circulated online, fueling debates about guilt, forgiveness, and responsibility. Some argued Daniel didn't deserve prison. He'd already lost everything that mattered. Others said he was the perfect example of why leniency was dangerous. Inside his cell, Daniel followed the coverage in silence. Every headline felt like a personal attack, but he didn't blame anyone. The truth was simple. He had killed his best friend, and no excuse could change that. The more the investigation unfolded, the more the image of Ryan haunted him. Not as a ghost, but as a memory of the person who once trusted him with his life. As the trial date drew closer, the walls around Daniel seemed to close in. His lawyer warned him the evidence looked bad, that the public outrage might influence the judge's decision. Daniel only nodded. He didn't care about the sentence anymore. The real punishment had already begun, the kind that no courtroom could ever end. The courthouse was packed on the first day of the trial. Reporters filled every bench, cameras flashed outside, and the air buzzed with tension. For months, the city had followed every development of the case, and now the final act was about to unfold. Daniel sat beside his lawyer, eyes fixed on the floor, his face pale and drawn. He looked nothing like the confident entrepreneur who once smiled in news articles. He was thinner, quieter, and visibly broken. Each movement seemed heavy, as if the weight of guilt had permanently settled into his bones. Across the aisle sat Ryan's parents, their expressions carved with grief. His mother clutched a framed photo of her son, while his father stared straight ahead, unblinking. Behind them, friends, co-workers, and strangers who had followed the story waited in silence. No one spoke. The courtroom felt like a place where time had stopped, where every breath was measured, every sound too loud. The prosecution began by presenting the evidence that had already made headlines. They played the security footage of Daniel leaving the bar, pausing on the moment he sat alone in the car. They showed photos of the beer cans found under the seat, the blood test confirming his alcohol level, and the twisted wreckage of the BMW. Each image hit Daniel like a blow to the chest. The prosecutor's voice remained steady, methodical, describing Daniel's actions as selfish, deliberate, and preventable. He called the crash not just an accident, but a chain of decisions that ended a young man's life. Daniel's defense attorney tried to soften the picture. He spoke about Daniel's character, his clean record, his remorse. He reminded the court that Daniel had not tried to flee, that he had stayed at the scene and fully cooperated with police. He said Daniel was already serving a life sentence inside his mind. The defense played a short video from Daniel's family showing moments of his past. Him and Ryan as teenagers, playing hockey, laughing, growing up together. The courtroom remained silent as the images flickered across the screen. When Ryan's mother took the stand, the silence turned suffocating. Her voice trembled as she described the night she received the call. The disbelief, the scream that left her throat when she saw her son's body in the hospital. She said she had known Daniel since he was a boy, that she once trusted him like her own son, but that trust was gone forever. Daniel couldn't lift his eyes as she spoke, every word cut deeper than any sentence the judge could deliver. After 3 days of testimony, closing arguments began. The prosecution demanded a strong sentence, arguing that leniency would send the wrong message to others. The defense pleaded for compassion, saying Daniel had shown more remorse than most could ever express. When the judge finally returned with the decision, the entire courtroom held its breath. The verdict was clear. Daniel Moore was sentenced to 7 years in prison and a 10-year driving ban. The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some believed it was too harsh. Others whispered that it wasn't enough. Daniel didn't react. He simply nodded, tears pooling in his eyes. As officers led him away, he turned once toward Ryan's parents, but they didn't look at him. The doors closed behind him and the noise of the courtroom faded into silence. In that moment, Daniel realized this was not the end of his punishment. It was only the beginning. Prison was a different world, stripped of color, sound, and freedom. The days bled into each other, marked only by the clang of metal doors and the distant echo of voices down the corridors. Daniel kept to himself. He rarely spoke, even when other inmates tried to draw him into conversation. He wasn't there to make friends or to prove anything. Every morning he woke up with the same thought: Ryan should have been alive, not him. That single truth overshadowed everything. For the first few months, Daniel struggled to eat or sleep. Nightmares haunted him relentlessly. He would wake up drenched in sweat, hearing the screech of tires and the crunch of metal, as if the crash were happening again and again. The prison counselor urged him to join a rehabilitation group for offenders dealing with guilt and addiction. At first he refused. He didn't believe he deserved help, but after nearly a year in isolation, he joined quietly, sitting in the back during meetings. He never spoke, just listened to the broken stories of others who had made irreversible mistakes. Slowly, he began to realize that silence wasn't penance. It was escape, and it wasn't helping him heal. Over time, Daniel started writing. His first letters were to Ryan's family. They were never sent. Each one began with an apology and ended in tears. He filled dozens of pages trying to find words big enough to hold his regret, but none ever felt right. Eventually, he began writing to Ryan himself, describing the days, the memories, the emptiness. These letters became his ritual, a way to confront the past instead of running from it. He stored them neatly in a shoebox beneath his bunk, unread by anyone but him. By his 3rd year inside, Daniel began speaking at prison meetings about drunk driving. His voice shook the first few times, but soon it steadied. He told his story without excuses, emphasizing that one moment of arrogance can erase an entire lifetime of good intentions. Some inmates listened closely. Others looked away, unwilling to face their own reflections in his words. For Daniel, it didn't matter. He wasn't preaching, he was confessing. When his 7-year sentence finally ended, Daniel walked out into the cold Toronto air, thinner but calmer. A small crowd of reporters waited beyond the gates, shouting questions. They wanted a statement, a headline, a soundbite of remorse. Daniel said nothing. He kept walking, his breath forming clouds in the morning air. There were no handshakes, no hugs, no family waiting for him. He had chosen to rebuild quietly, away from the noise. That afternoon, he took a bus across the city to a small park overlooking Lake Ontario. Near the edge of the water stood a simple wooden bench with a brass plaque that read, "In memory of Ryan Blake, beloved son, brother, and friend." Daniel approached slowly, his steps unsteady. He placed a single white rose on the seat and stood there for a long time, watching the rippling water. The wind carried the faint scent of winter, cold and pure. He whispered a silent apology, not expecting forgiveness, not asking for peace. The waves kept moving. The city continued to hum in the distance, and for the first time since that night, Daniel allowed himself to breathe. He knew forgiveness might never come, from Ryan's family, from the world, or from himself. But standing before that bench, he understood something deeper. He couldn't undo the past, but he could choose what came next. And that choice, however small, was the beginning of something that felt almost like redemption. In the end, the story of Daniel Moore and Ryan Blake is a haunting reminder that one careless decision can destroy countless lives. A moment of confidence behind the wheel turned friendship into tragedy, and celebration into lifelong regret. Daniel's story isn't just about guilt and punishment. It's a lesson about responsibility, choices, and the irreversible cost of drunk driving. If you drink, don't drive. Share this story to spread awareness and help save lives. Subscribe for more real crime documentaries that uncover the truth behind every tragic headline.